Is it there? Hello, everybody. I'm Alec Torelli. Welcome to the webinar, and thank you, everybody, for joining. Sorry I'm a few minutes late. I had some technical difficulties. That was my first time doing this, but I am excited to test this out with you guys. I've had a few requests for people to do something like this where people can interact and engage with me that in another way other than just through the blog, and this is a little more personal, so I'm excited to do something like this. All right, so a few things to go over. I received a bunch of questions from you guys for sending in emails and stuff, so thank you for that. Like this. Hey, Manny. All right. So a few things to go over. Turn down the. I received a bunch of questions. Or put on headphones or something. I for sending in emails and stuff, so thank you for that. Bear with me, guys. I hear echo in someone's background, so I gotta turn someone's chat off. Okay. Testing out chat, just making sure this works. Hello. All right, so I received a bunch of questions, and I'm hoping I get some during the broadcast as well that I'll be taking so we can actually engage in real time here. But for the, I guess first thing is leave your comments and questions that you want me to address going forward in the next webinar. If I don't get to this afterwards, this will be streamed on YouTube, so you could watch this at any time. So be sure to share the link with anyone you think would enjoy it, or people that would find this valuable. I'd really appreciate that. Also, if you have questions that you want me to address next time, or topics of consideration that you'd like to be in a future webinar, leave them in the comments below on this YouTube, and I will perhaps make a themed webinar next time where you talk about a specific subject, like bankroll management, for example, or re-raising strategy pre-flop, or whatever it is. Whatever I get the most of, I will include in the future. So be sure to leave your comments below on this channel afterwards, and with things you'd like to hear more of. Cool stuff. So it appears I'm talking to myself so far, which oh, hi everybody. So I'm gonna see who's in here, see who I'm talking to, because right now it looks like I'm talking to myself, but oh, there we go. Wow, there's quite a few people here. Hello. So experimented around with this, so I should be able to hear from people that talk, and then your voice will pop up on the screen. So I'm hoping that, I don't know why I can't see anybody's picture, but I'm going to open this up in the beginning to questions. I know you guys might be shy, but just try and talk like one at a time, because it automatically takes the voice of the person that is talking. So if someone has a question, they could answer in between, and I'll kind of cue you in when to open it up for questions. I don't have a specific subject in mind for the webinar. There's not like one particular subject I'm going to cover. We'll go in depth about a few of the questions that we find interesting, and I have a bunch of questions that readers sent into me. One thing that I think is going to be sort of thematic about this webinar, and sort of some of the things that I hear from a lot of my fans and readers that inquire to me, and just questions that go back and forth on YouTube or social media, and a lot of things I hear from my clients as well, my private clients that I have in my coaching practice, is people want to generally find a way that they can perform their best, they could play their best poker. I feel like a lot of people have an A game that's really, really good, and their struggles are that they can't necessarily access that A game as much as they would like to, because everybody knows, and I'm sure you guys know, what it's like to play amazing poker when you feel like you're really concentrated, or you're in the zone, and you're really observant of everything that's going on. And it's almost like you have this supersonic ability where you can see other people's cards, like, because you're playing so well, you're so in the zone, you're so focused on what's going on, that you feel like almost invincible at the table. And it's a great feeling. The problem is that those situations happen few and far between. So a lot of the things that I work with in my clients, and I try to advise in my products and services and videos and content that I put out, is like how to get people to access that A-game poker that they have, that they really only play maybe once every month or once every 7 or 8 sessions. And it's like, how do you make the other 6 sessions like that one session that you play excellent? And that's a lot of what I specialize in, a lot of what I work on. And so I think a lot of the questions are going to be subject around that. And if I had to pick like what a theme would be for this webinar, it might be something along those lines. And that's where I really feel like amateurs separate themselves from professionals. And I think it's just it's really what separates good players from great players, because the difference is a lot of consistency. And so there's a huge difference between most people's A games and C games, and that's the big thing that people need to work on. So I have a few questions here that were brought out to readers of me, so I'm going to open up with those, get a little content going, and then open it up to questions for you guys, because I definitely want to engage with you guys. That's why you're here, and that's why this is a webinar, not a video. So first question comes from Matt Montgomery from Milwaukee. Thank you for writing in. He's a cash game question. So he says he usually plays 1-3 no limit with 300 max buy-in at his casino, and he plays once a week. He often hears pros talk about exploiting opponents through bet sizing, but he's not 100% sure how to apply that to his opponents that he experiences within his regular game. He says, I generally categorize opponents by loose or tight and aggressive and passive. And his question is, how do you exploit the various opponent styles based on different bet sizing on each street? And what does he sort of do in categorizing the opponents? So, okay, Matt, big question. And I think that, first off, I'm always apprehensive about generalizing, making general observations about how opponents play. I hear a lot of people come to me and they're like, well, this guy was a fish, so I did this. Or this guy was a pro, so I did that. And that sort of seems to be the justification for why they took a certain action. But I think that that's really a mistake. So loose and tight is a little bit more descriptive, almost in a way, than pro or fish. But in the same way, it's still very vague. And the problem is that making blanket statements like, oh, this guy's a fish or this guy's a pro, don't really tell you that much about how the opponent actually plays. So what does tight mean? Is he tight because he never raises preflop and he limps in all the time? Or is he tight because he only check calls and he never raises, or he's never the biggest aggressor in the hand? So I challenge you to first explore these labels that you have and make them a little bit more specific, because they will, in doing so, it will give you more information about your opponents and hopefully lead you to a more conclusive way that you should be playing against them. For example, if someone is really loose, that's good, but if he's loose in the sense that he is hyper-aggressive and he's always playing back at you, that's different than someone that's loose who's limping in a lot and just check folding when they miss the board. So your bet sizing against the former is much different than the latter. So let's look into a specific example here. Let's say you're playing against any type of opponent. Let's say you're playing a really loose, aggressive opponent, and this player is generally a calling station. He for whatever, let's say he has like an ego about him and he wants to prove to other people that he's not going to get run over in the game. He's sort of like a table bully, and he likes to be the hero. So if this is how you profile your opponent, that's much more descriptive and much more elaborate than just something specific, like something basic like, oh, he's loose. So now you have a very good picture about how this type of person plays. And let's say you're on the river and you have a monster hand and you want to bet, and you're like, okay, the pot is $100, and you want to get your maximum value for your hand. And your question might be like, well, should I bet half the pot, or 3/4 of the pot, or the whole pot, or twice the pot? How do I justify that based on who my opponent is? Well, you already told me, or I told you actually, your opponent has the propensity to call and be a hero, and he wants to prove to other people that he's amazing at the table, and he could show off by his excellence. So this type of opponent is probably not going to fold to you. And if that's the case, you might as well bet bigger, because he's going to call your bet regardless. And sometimes if people like that specific profile are the type of people that think that a bigger bet is more indicative of a bluff, and they have a bigger chance to show off their superior skill by making a hero call. So I would give my opponent the chance to do that when I have the nuts, and I would bet, the pot. And if the pot's $100, I'd bet $100, and he's going to call me regardless, but I might as well give him a chance to lose the most amount of money possible. So profiling your opponents better will be a first step towards your bet sizing, and then finding, psychologically what they're actually thinking and how they approach the game will help you determine, what bet sizing to make. So it's not really like a black and white answer, and whether it's my videos or my coaching or my products, you'll see that I don't give too many black and white answers. Black and white game really hard, specific blanket statement towards everything. So hope that helped. That's my A to your Q. I got quite a few more of these here. So you guys will be here for an hour or so, I'm sure. Hello, everybody that just joined. I see a few people join. One person left. He doesn't like me. Bye, Noah. That's sad. Everybody else joined, though. How's everybody going? Hello, Mike. Hermad. How you guys doing? Thank you for joining. I know you could be anywhere, so thank you for being here. Hey, Mike. What's up? Was that you, Mike? Oh, no, that's a different Mike. Okay. So new Mike has a question. So next question comes from Todd. Let's see here. Says, I would like to take this opportunity to ask a question in regards to defending my blinds, particularly in 1-2 no-limit ring games. Sometimes I take certain liberties that ultimately put me in uncomfortable situations. So maybe he's being a little too loose here from the blind. For example, he says if under the gun raises 3x and gets 5 callers, he asks, what's my best long-term play here in the big blind, given that he's getting a great price to call when he looks down at a hand like 7-8, for example. He goes on to say, it's tough to figure the math on a huge raise because I'm never sure of my fold equity, meaning he's not sure if he should 3-bet here on a bluff. He's not sure how often his re-raise is going to get through. He says it does seem profitable, though, and he asks, is calling a mistake if the table is really deep? Should my consideration for calling be based on similar criteria for set mining, like the odds of that he could flop a big hand and win a lot of money post-flop? So, Todd, great question, and thank you for providing so much detail. It's good to see some of your thought process here, too, so I can know where to attack this from. So first of all, I would say that this answer applies to any poker game that you're playing in, because the strategy to make the decision encompasses the same variables, and so you don't need to take this only if you're playing 1-2 no limit. If I'm playing 100-200 no limit, I would still use the same factors to make the decisions that I'm going to discuss with you. So it's important that you have the formula for making decisions so that you could apply that to any poker game you play, whether it's 1-2 or you move up to the 5-10 game. You still want to have a practical way to answer these questions that everybody struggles with, that everybody faces, right? So let's take your specific example, and I'm going to walk you through it and then give you some of that criteria to build upon and take into your own poker game so that you have an idea of some of the things that I would consider to be valuable when you're making these different decisions. So under the gun raises 3x and gets 5 callers. You're in the big blind. It's 2x for you to call. So the pot is, let's say the pot is 17. No, let's say the blinds are 5. Let's say the blinds are 1-2. We'll stick with your analogy. So the pot is 6 times 5 is 30, plus the small blind is 31. So you're calling $2. You're calling $4, sorry, to win $33. So you're getting a great price. Okay, so the first thing you do is figure out, what odds am I getting to call here? And you're getting a great price to call. So you know that you can call with a wider range of hands. That's like a broad way of looking at the situation. You asked about 3-betting specifically. How do you determine whether you should 3-bet, call, or fold? So the person that you have to be the most concerned about in the hand is the place that you should give the most credence to making your decision, right? So in this particular hand, and in most situations that you face, it's going to be the raiser, because generally the raiser is the person that represented the strongest amount of hand range that he could possibly have in this hand. Third caller, for example, can't really have a super strong hand because he would have 3-bet with that hand pre-flop. So you're not really too worried about the other callers in the hand as much as you're worried about the raiser. So one of the things I'm asking myself is, especially when considering the 3-bet, is how often am I going to get credit from the raiser. What do I know about him specifically? And you have to give a lot more weight to him than the other opponents. So is he the type of player that's going to fold, or is he going to 4-bet me, or is he going to call? You have to figure that, especially in these smaller cash games, if it's sort of like the domino effect. If the raiser calls, everyone's going to try and call. And so that plays a big part into my decision-making process. If he's going to 4-bet you or fold, then that's another. Are you willing to give away your equity pre-flop on the chance that you might not see the flop? So if you 3-bet with a hand like 7-8, and your opponent is only going to 4-bet or fold, then you might not see the flop often with that hand. So you have to weigh that against the chance that your hand is going to flop a decent amount of equity. So I might be more inclined to 3-bet like something like 7-8 suited because my hand plays better post-flop. You also have to consider your image. Like, how well can you represent strong hands here? What do other people think about you? Or what do other people think empirically about this situation? Are they going to give you credit for a strong hand based on how the flow of your game plays? Or are they going to think this guy's bluffing and he's stealing and nobody's going to give you credit, and they're going to maybe call you lighter pre-flop and not give you credit post-flop, so you can't represent an ace or a king on a dry textured board post-flop? That's going to be harder to justify 3-betting pre-flop. So you got to think levels ahead here and think, how is this hand going to work out for me, and how do I give myself the most chances of winning the hand? That being said, you do have direct odds to call with a lot of hands. So you can realize your equity simply by calling. So I would be defending a lot of hands here as a blanket statement. I would be defending 7-8 offsuit for sure. And the other things to consider about like what hands to defend is like how bad are the opponents that you're playing? Are they really easy to play post-flop? Are they the type of players that are really big calling stations and they're never going to fold pre-flop or on the flop? If so, I would never really 3-bet because you can't really get your hand through. You can't win the pot unless you make a big hand. If they're the type of players that play very ABC post-flop, then your positional disadvantage isn't that big of a deal, and you could realize your equity by calling, and you could also flop a big hand and bust people. 7-8 plays pretty well. You could flop straights and stuff like that. So it's a great hand to be in there with. You're definitely getting odds to call it. And the worse your players are, the more you can justify calling, because the more maneuverability you're going to have post-flop. Actually, you also have spots flop. Those very aggressive players that are going to value bet thinly and put you in. So I think those are some of the things to consider, and I think this changes slightly as you move up in stakes because your players are going to be different, so you're going to be making these decisions differently. It's generally easier to steal a pot pre-flop with a 3-bet in bigger stakes games because people are more cautious with ranges and they're going to fold more often to you. Something about the absolute value of the money when you start playing above 5-10 makes people play more cautiously. So if you're playing a 10-20 game against, even pros are almost more predictable in spots like these where their flat calling range for 3-bets is pretty narrow, and it's pretty obvious like the types of hands they could have, whereas weaker looser small stakes players could have like sort of any 2 cards. They might even call you with like Queen 7 suited or something ridiculous. So it's harder to get those plays through. So I think in the bigger games this is like even a more effective play because it's just easier to win the pot more often with your 3-bet. So anyway, those are some things to consider, and I hope that helps. I think that's the methodology to make the decision is much more important than actually what you're supposed to do with 7-8 in this one particular situation. It's more about how to formulate that decision and how to make that. So, good stuff. All right, moving on. More questions. Cool. So Stacy asks, when playing in cash games lower level, like 1-2 or 2-5, it's always easy to 3-bet with the top of her range. But how do you pick spots to do that with the bottom or the mid-range hands like King-Jack suited? So I play in a crazy 50-cent $1 home game that gets so crazy that often see $300 pots, which is huge for that game. And at any time they could have $3,000 in cash on the table. One player is very aggressive and often on my left. And she says, what is the best way to play very aggressive player on your left in a cash game who's very wide? She goes on to say specifically, in our game, he will often call with air on the flops just to see if he improves on the turn. So, Stacey, I did answer a bit of your pre-flop question in Todd's question before. So I think I'm not going to go too much into that about how 3-betting pre-flop. But I think what's much more important and what's more practical to you and a lot of players I know struggle with this is like, how do you play when there's a very aggressive player on your left who's forcing you to make a hand? Basically, he doesn't allow you to steal the blinds pre-flop, and he doesn't allow you to c-bet on the flop effectively because he's either going to call you or raise you on a bluff, and he's just going to make you make a hand. That's pretty much the toughest type of opponent to play against if he's doing this with a correct frequency. So if he's overly loose, he falls off the spectrum of being tough because you simply just look him up and win money often enough because he's just too loose that you can call him down lightly and force him to show you a hand. And if he doesn't have a hand often enough, you can use that as an effective strategy to combat his hyper over-aggression. Now, if he's doing this with any sort of calibrated frequency, or if he's intelligent at all and he understands how to hand read, then it becomes really, really tough to just look him up because he's going to know what spots that you have hands with showdown value and what spots your range is weak and you have nothing. He's going to know which spots he can bluff you or which spots he can represent strong hands. So you can't just play so ABC and you can't have such an easy, effective strategy. So the easy strategy is, if you're playing against too weak of a player, you can look him up lightly. Secondly, and this is more trivial, you can move seats to be in a better position, which, if you're playing in a game regularly, you shouldn't put yourself in that spot often. But let's go on to like a little bit more advanced how to adjust to this sort of style of opponent. So and you might not like the advice I'm going to give you, but the short answer is that you have to play tighter. And the reason is that poker is dictated much more on position than actual hand strength. And if you think about how your opening range plays out post-flop and how strong your range is pre-flop, most of the time you don't have premium hands when you're playing poker. And that's why c-betting is so effective from a game theory standpoint. The reason that you probably c-bet often, and a lot of you guys 3-bet often or bluff often on the flop, is because nobody has a strong hand that they could defend with. Or if they do have a strong hand, they have a hand that they can only defend one street with. Or there's a lot of scare cards that make them not be able to defend. And given that this is true, it proves the point that you generally don't have really, really strong hands. And if you're playing against a really tough, aggressive player who's to your left, as frustrating as it is, the best strategy is just to play tighter because you take away his ability to outplay you. So you're not really, by tightening your range, you're making it much more costly for him to make the same plays against you. So if he's going to, let's say you played this game forever, and your opponent never changed his strategy, which many players don't. They actually just play their own game. If he were to never change his strategy, I would say you should play the way I'm telling you. You should just play really tight. You should play something like 10, 15% of hands, depending on your position. And you should play almost more straightforward post-flop in that you should bet when you have equity that you could defend, and you should check when you don't. And depending on how he plays specifically, you might want to mix it up where you like, if he's the type of player that floats every time you bet, then just start betting with stronger ranges and start checking when you don't have anything. And even though you're giving up a lot by conceding the pot by checking, you're giving up more by betting if you're going to be betting with weak hands that can't defend and you're going to check fold the turn. So your option is to either give up no more money if you check the flop and you concede the pot when he c-bets and wins, or you could give up a flop c-bet and then check fold the turn. So you don't have you have two bad choices. You could lose what's already in the pot, or you could lose what's in the pot plus your c-bet. You're making a decision based on the situation you're in. And even though that seems like a little exploitable, I think it's the best strategy for someone that's hyper-aggressive. Now, you should play that way until your opponent starts to notice that you're playing a little bit more ABC and you've adjusted your game. And that may or may not take him a long time. It might take him 4 or 5 hands. It might take him I don't know. He might never change his strategy because some people just play the same way and they want to be the table captain and they want to show everybody that they're going to put you to tough decisions, and that's why they play poker. They like that sort of excitement and to bully people around. So if he changes his strategy, well, then of course you should go back to bluffing a little bit more or opening more or maybe even going next level and like checking the flop when you actually have a mediocre hand that can withstand his c-bet, because you don't want to make yourself so easy to play against that you raise pre-flop, he calls you with any two cards, and then if you check the flop, he knows you're going to check fold 100% of the time. So mix it up and check raise some of the time or check call some of the time, and just make sure that you're not being too predictable in spots like that. But the key is just to play tighter overall and just to bet and defend when you have equity in hands. I think that's the best way to combat aggression, and it's frustrating that he puts you to that spot, but that's sort of the best thing you could do because you're pretty much in the worst position on the table, which means you're going to have the least profitable seat, and so your hands are a little bit tight. Anyway, hope that helps. Try that out. Let me know how it goes. Send me a comment. Shoot me a comment on the YouTube channel after on this particular video, and let me know if you can switch seats, how that helped, or if you implemented some of these strategies. I'd be curious to know how it goes. So let me know. All right, I talked a bunch. I'm going to open it up for a few questions. Does someone have a question they would like to answer here? I see a few people here on the chat. Raise your hand. Okay, yeah, Norman, go ahead. I saw you raise your hand first. Jump in.
So, can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, I can, and so could everybody else. So welcome.
Hey, so I'm kind of just like a casual player. Like I'll go to the casino and just play tight, I guess. And how do you go from just being like a casual player to becoming a more serious player? Like, what are the top things you have to take into consideration if you're trying to become a more serious player and like make real money?
Okay, so give me a little bit more background about your situation. Like, what stakes do you play? What are the games at the casino you play? And give me a little bit more background to give you a better answer.
1-2. I'll play 1-2 or I'll play 2-5, and it's just like maybe once or a couple times a month I'll do it. But it's like I have friends who are, pretty serious about it, and I see they're making money and all this stuff. So I was like, okay. I just feel like when I go play, it's just like I'm just really tight. I feel like I get like blinded out a lot,
Okay, so you're playing mostly cash games then, it sounds like, right?
Yeah, or like occasionally I'll play low buy-in tournaments too.
Okay, so is that, if I was just going to ask you, what do you feel like your biggest obstacle is that's holding you back from going where you are to where you want to be? Is it that you just play too tight, or what would you say it is?
Maybe that. I mean, I don't. I'm not like I can like some of my I've played with some of my friends who are better than me, and they always seem to know like, okay, this guy's messing around with me, and like, okay, now's the time I can like gamble with him or something. Just I never seem to like pick up on that or something. I always just like I play ABC like you say. So maybe it's just I need more play time or more experience or something.
Yeah, how often are you getting to play? You play a couple times a month?
Yeah, like a couple times a month.
Okay. Sorry, talking a lot, just stop. Okay, so I'll give you a general answer first for people that aren't in your specific situation, and then I'll try and answer your questions as well. I think I don't want to say something obvious like playing more poker will make you improve, because of course, but I understand that people have time limitations, how much time they can invest in poker, right? So I think that the vast majority of you and a lot of my clients even, and a lot of aspiring professionals, and even a lot of professionals that could be better than they are, they might spend a lot of time on the game of poker, right? They spend a lot of time invested in poker. But if they look at how that time is being spent in poker, it's very, very one-sided. So if I were to draw a circle, right, and I were to say to you, make slices like you would a pie, and tell me how your time is spent when it's spent on the subject of poker. And you could say my rate of answers. You could say I spend time reading, spend time studying, I spend time watching Alec Torelli on YouTube. I don't know. You could play poker too. You could talk with friends. You could do a lot of different things. But I feel like the vast majority of people, when they draw these circles, too large of a percentage of their time is being spent playing poker, and not enough of that time of the circles are filled up with time working on being better at poker. So I would say that some people are like, sadly, some people are 100% with playing, and that's how I started out in playing poker. Most of the thing I just did was like I just played poker. I watched some on TV and I read a book. So maybe 85% of my time was spent playing. And slowly, as I progressed in my career throughout the years, more and more of that time that I was still spending a ton of time at poker. I was still, I would say casually, I was playing poker 70, 80 hours a week, but I wasn't actually playing 70 or 80 hours a week. I was spending time on poker. So more and more of that time was spent studying and doing things away from the poker table to help me get better when I went to the poker table. And if you look at, and it depends how serious you want to get at the game. If you look at the trajectory of an athlete, and I like to make analogies to athletes, also because I really admire watching sports and what they do, but also because it's really easy for people to understand sort of the level of intensity that a professional might apply towards something like poker. So if you watch something like tennis or football is a great example. I know it's football season. They can play football on Sundays, but that doesn't mean that they're not spending time on football between Monday and Saturday. They're spending time watching tape or running sprints or lifting weights or taking care of their bodies or like practicing on the field. But they're doing a lot of things that are involving themselves in the world of football, but they're not only just playing against the competition, right? So if you look at it like that, I would challenge you to say that every time you go to the casino, Norman, and also everybody watching it, is sort of like a game day. And if you don't view it like game day, it either means that you're not bringing the intensity or the severity, seriousness that you need to the game, or that game days have become so habitual that you're not spending enough time away from the game days to make game days significant. So that would be my first challenge to you, is just reshape the way you're sort of possibly spending your time in the poker world and to spend more of it improving at being better at playing poker. Now, to answer your question specifically,
like reading books or something?
Go ahead.
You're talking about reading books or just watching stuff? And like, what would you do outside of actually just playing? I mean, other than like reading and studying and watching tape and stuff.
Yeah, those are.
Is there any regimen?
Yeah, those.
Really tight. I feel like I get blinded out a lot.
Hey, can you mute your volume, Noah? We're hearing echo here. Cash games, it sounds like, right? Hey, Noah, can you mute your volume? Everybody's. Oh, so that. Gotta mute you, Noah. All right, thank you. Sorry about that, guys. So, lost my train of thought. Yeah, so there's definitely doing, talking to other players that you aspire to be like or that you value their input is huge, because that's like the real-time feedback from other people, and I think having that community is big, and that was really what helped me improve dramatically in the beginning of my career. I was lucky to be around people like Andrew Rubel and Tom Vaughn and David Benefield when I was very young, and I met them my first live poker tournament when I was 18. And I could talk poker with people like that and people that are coming up, and a lot of people now that are really successful in the industry that I came up with, and I was lucky to have those people around me, and that's really one of the big things that contributed to me being successful. And I always had that to smaller degrees. Obviously, even when I was playing home games when I was 16, I had one guy that I talked poker with literally all the time. So we would only get, we were in high school, we didn't get to play a lot of poker after school and stuff. We were constricted by life, being a teenager. But we spend a lot of time working on, thinking about, and studying poker. So I know people don't always have. Noah, you're. A lot of professionals, and even a lot of professionals. So, I wish I had more time to study with other people and more people that I could study with. But one exercise I would give you that I like to do that I know really helps is to rethink think all of the hands, because you don't always have people that you could talk to or people that you respect your opinion, or you don't always have like, people that you can just converse with about the game. So one exercise I really like doing is keep track of the hands you play during your session. Either memorize them, ideally you should have a good poker hand memory, or write them down if you can't memorize them. And after the session, review them so that you can think about all the different permutations of how you could have played that hand and what you could have done differently or what you could do next time to improve. Then extrapolate that data and be like, okay, well, I'm going to do this, and then what would I do differently if the stacks were different? What would I do differently if our positions were changed? What would I do differently if I was playing against this other opponent that's much harder to play against? And sort of use this as an exercise to be thinking about the game consistently while you're not playing, and that'll kind of like keep poker always on your mind. And I think that really, really helps. In conjunction with that, you want to do some work on the numbers side of things. You want to use some poker programs, like even something simple like Poker Stove, which gives you like math calculations based on the different hands that you have. So you could plug in the hand you have and then plug in the hands that your opponent could have, and it could tell you, hey, this is the percentage of the time that you're going to win the pot based on what hand range you give to your opponents. And so that stuff is really, really helpful, because not only does it give you the analytical side of things and the creative side of things of what you could have done differently in the hand, but it shows you from a mathematical perspective how you should be formulating decisions based on, the odds of you winning and stuff. So you're kind of attacking it from both standpoints, and I think that work to do is really, really important. There's definitely a place for watching videos. I think, hopefully some of you have improved just, hearing me dissect the hand on YouTube. Sure, that stuff sort of helps, but unless you're actually applying that to your game somehow, the growth that you experience is going to be stagnant and limited, because you're not really. It's great to see how I played a hand for someone once upon a time. That was cool, but unless you're like, okay, you take it a step further and you say, okay, this is what he did that worked. What can I do in my situation that's similar, using the same tactics I learned in this video, or that I read in this book, or that I saw on this television watching the World Series? Like, what are the people doing? And then let me take that to my own game, and where can I apply that strategy? And that's where the real depth of work happens, and that's where the improvement happens. So I understand that people don't always have the time to play more poker. Of course, playing more poker will help, but I play poker with a lot of people. I'm sure you have too. You probably play poker with a lot of people that have been like, I've been playing for 13 years. And like, how are they so bad playing for 13 years? Like, how are they still like, ABC, like they're playing for 13 years? Like, what did they do the whole time, So it doesn't really matter how long you've been playing or how much you play unless you're working on getting better at playing, right? Like some people are, they're 50 years old, they've been cooking for 30 years, but they're not great cooks just because they make normal food, right? Like, you could do an activity often and not be good at it because you're not working at improving. So there's a huge difference between like spending time doing it and working at spending time doing it. And so I think that treating it like, more of like an exercise like you would at school, doing homework, is really going to step your game up. So that was my long answer, but hope that helps.
Makes sense.
Awesome. So Noah keeps coming and going. Noah, I'm sorry, something's wrong with your video, man. If you have a question, type it in chat. Maybe I'll get to it here. So does anybody else have a question? Mike, maybe? I see you in there. How's it going, man? Olaf, sorry to put you guys on the spot. Emad, if you guys have questions, go ahead.
Can you hear me? How did you hear? Hello?
There's Diego. Hey, Diego. Hey, Diego. Try to turn off your volume, man. It's hard to hear. So anyway, I'll go back to another email question. Mike, if Diego, you guys have questions, if you want to be on video, go ahead and talk. Hey, Diego, what's up? You okay? You guys have questions? If you want to be on video, go ahead and talk. Yeah, Diego, you got to put on headphones. Anyway, I'll answer another question from you. I've got a bunch of these here. So, if someone has a question too, you guys are welcome to join in. I'd like to hear from you guys in the webinar too. So, all right, let's see. Trent has 3 questions. I'll answer one of them. Trent's 25-year-old Canadian dude, he says. All right. Let me see. I'm going to pick one of your questions. What is your advice? All right. So he says, I'm a pretty disciplined player, and he represents a tight, aggressive image. He plays, I play very few, if any, limped pots, and I'm always aggressive in position pre-flop. Good. That's a good strategy to have. So sounds like he plays pretty tight, aggressive, solid. I consistently seem to run up some nice 250 big blind stacks for the majority of most of my sessions, but can never seem to break through with the big wins. Lots of small wins, or even breaking even over 5 or 6 hour sessions. Obviously, I know there's variance involved, and not to be results-oriented, but here's the question. What is your advice on continuing to build and maintaining monster stacks when playing super deep? Good question. Thanks for asking, Trent. So, I mean, it's a pretty broad question here, so I'm going to try and give you something practical that I think is valuable. So, of course, you're losing, or you not achieving that very big win could be due to variance, and it could be due to the fact that, depending on how long you're playing, I guess I'm saying I wouldn't necessarily measure your results based on only the win size of your short-term sessions, because, of course, you could quit at a certain point. You could just not have enough time to build up a big stack. Let's face it, if you're playing 6 hours of live poker, you're playing 200 hands of poker, and so if you win 150, 250 big blinds, that's a huge win per hand of poker you're playing. So it is a big win. That being said, more directly to your question, what is your advice on continuing to build and maintaining stacks when playing super deep? Maybe you can't sorry, my wife just turned off the lights. Anyway, so you also asked me about your image, which I think is sort of what you're asking in question. Image as well. So, you gotta think the exercise I would have you do give you more perspective on how it's likely that your opponents are thinking about you as a winning player during that session is to challenge you to say, okay, Trent, what do you think when someone else you're playing against is in the situation that you're in? So how do you react to them, if at all, when they're winning 250 big blinds in 4 hours? What adjustments are you playing, more aggressively versus them? Are you going to 3-bet them more? Or are you going to just stay out of their way more and assume that that player is, now he's a threat, he's a little dangerous, he's doing well, he's winning? And I think that most players will find that it's more towards the latter. I think that they give the stacks more credit. People play against them. They stay out of their way. They don't assume that you're going to bluff, because I think that you wouldn't assume another big stack is bluffing if he just won a ton of money at the table, because, let's face it, when you're winning a lot of money, you're not as likely to risk it and bluff, because you don't want to lose back the money you just won. You're like, okay, I'm cruising, I'm on cruise control, I'm up $150 or $1,500 or $15,000, 150 big blinds, whatever it is. I'm winning a lot of money. Why would I 3-bet with Queen 9 suited in the small blind? I'm just going to play ABC poker and just lock up the win and just wait for my big hands, and life is good. So in the same way that's how many of you play, and Trent, that might be what you're doing. If you notice your behavioral patterns, you might be changing the way that you play because you're winning, and ironically, you need to keep doing more of what you were doing when you were even, because that's what got you to the point where you're winning. So make sure you're not changing your strategy when you are winning, simply because you're winning, and now you're like, oh, I want to lock up this win. If you feel that you're going to change your strategy based on your results at the table in the moment, then your head's out of the game, you're not in control, and you should quit. Whether you're winning or losing, if you can't play your game because of the results, then you're not in the game. So make sure you're not doing that. And I do notice that some of the times with people I play against, or clients of mine, or behavioral patterns where they're winning, and then they're like, oh, well, I did this because I was winning. And it's like, well, you should just do the best thing. So if what got you to winning isn't what you're doing, then you're doing something wrong. The second thing is, what adjustments could you make as a big stack, and how do people react to you? So in the same way we just did that little bit of a mirror exercise, you should think what are you most likely to assume about another big stack? Probably you're going to assume that they're not getting too out of line, And so maybe it's a better opportunity to even open up your game a little bit. You probably have some table presence that's strong. You probably have people that are a little afraid of you. You probably have people that aren't going to 3-bet you lightly, so you could maybe even play a little more ABC post-flop when you're facing aggression. People probably aren't going to just be gunning for you. They're not going to just like float you on the flop and try to make some big play against you, because they might be a little intimidated, or because you're winning, or because you're the big stack, or because they're going to pick on someone that's a little bit softer of a target. Even if you're not necessarily revered as the best player in the game, that doesn't really matter, because if you're winning during that session, you're the most feared player, and people are going to think you're possibly even better than you are. Even if you're great, they're going to think you're a great +1, because the cards are falling your way and everything seems to be going right. It seems like you're playing really, really well when you're winning, because poker can make you seem like that. And I'm not saying you're not excellent. I'm just saying that that's the perception that people have of you. So in order to play off that, you want to even turn up the aggression even more as you're winning. You don't want to get super out of line and people to think that they could just like call you with nothing. But I think that if you've been keeping that tag style, and people have noticed you show down really big hands, be aware of who the observant players are at the game, and see if you can open up your game a little bit and maybe even 3-bet them in spots where they open, or bluff raise them in a spot that you normally wouldn't. And I think you're going to get even more credit when you're winning than you would when you're losing. So I would possibly adjust opposite of the way that you've been adjusting, or that people generally adjust when they're winning. And I think this might be what's holding you back from that breakthrough. I think you should look at your patterns, and I would challenge all of you to do this. Look at your patterns when you're winning big, and notice if you feel an inner dialogue with yourself that's challenging the way that you normally play poker, that is like convincing you to play differently than you normally play. And that's a problem. It's throwing you off your game. So that's my good question, Trent. That was a really good one. Mike Brandon. All right. Sorry, I don't think my sound's working. My question is, does poker training work better than just watching videos? Other poker players on Twitch that usually have interactive commentary, reading books, and what kind of advantage would that training be? Are you meaning like coaching, Mike, or what do you mean poker training? What specifically do you mean? And I'm happy to answer. Your sound's not working? Maybe I muted you, which is really possible. I'm muting people. Yeah, I might have muted you. My bad. I didn't mean to mute you. You might have muted your sound too, sorry about that. So let me know about that, Mike. I will answer your question. In the meantime, I'm going to save time here and jump to another one. Opening it up again. Anybody? Diego, Emad, Olav, any of you guys have questions here that are in the webinar? If so, raise your hand. I'll go ahead, jump in. Nope. All right. So. All right. So I got another question from. Actually, got 3 more questions from Phil in South Korea. What's up, Phil? Hope you're here watching. Sorry, guys. There's a huge train that goes by my door, and if this is annoying or you hear this, just remember that it goes off all night. So, hey Noah, welcome back. What's up, buddy? Is your sound working now? Do you have a question? Jump in.
I think so. Finally. I guess my question for you is, with all the new Twitch streaming, and I'm sure you've heard of the new poker channel that's coming out, I was wondering if there's like any certain streams you follow, or if you still kind of get excited about new content in the poker world.
Okay. Me personally, like,
Yeah.
I guess you're looking for like more of a recommendation rather than my personal opinion. Like what I do in my free time. No, I actually don't follow that many poker things, because I mean my life has a lot of poker in it. So when I'm not doing webinars or making videos or responding to, I get a ton of comments on YouTube and Facebook. I'm really happy for them, but it does take an hour or 2 a day to respond to everybody. So when I'm not doing that, I'm not like, hey, let me watch a Twitch stream of someone and learn how they play poker more. It's like I do so much of that. I'm grateful for it. I'm really happy that I have that opportunity to do that with you guys and everybody else in my business, that like just disconnecting from it completely. There was a time in my career when that was like, eat, live, and breathe, more Twitch stuff. I wish I had better like advice to give you for like, hey, this Twitch channel is excellent or something, but it just don't. I haven't kept up with it as much. I Twitched once and I was like, this is cool. I could see how this is going to be huge. I'm sure someone's going to make $1 million doing it, and that's awesome. It's just not really like my favorite platform. Like it's just so demanding to be on 24 hours, twitching 20, 30, 40 hours a week. It's like I would just not have a life. I could never do anything else. So I haven't been as much up to date with Twitch, and I'm sorry. I wish I could be more of a resource for you there. So Norman has a quick question here. What are your favorite poker books? Okay, so I think that I haven't read a ton of books recently, but when I did read a lot of poker books, the one that stood out, and it wasn't even close, was a book by Tommy Angelo called Elements of Poker. And I will type it in the chat. I'm happy to give him money. He's great. I've read this book a few times. That book is amazing. So it's not about how to be better at playing poker, which is a strategy book, which you'll find a lot of on the market. It's a book about how to be a better poker player, which you don't find often, and is really, really valuable skill. So that book is great, and I would really recommend reading it. It's really insightful. It's philosophical. It's really good. I liked it a lot. I did write. I mean, Norman, if you're curious, I have to say that I think I just wrote a book on poker about called 4 Steps to Beating Anyone at No Limit Hold'em. 4 Steps to Beating Anyone at Poker, and it's primarily based on No Limit Hold'em, but you could apply the concepts to any poker game, and it's pretty much everything you need to know about strategy. We talk about how to make decisions in poker and how to apply them to any situation that you're facing. So it's really like a blueprint and a methodology for decision making, and I use hands that I've played or hands that I've seen or witnessed or from clients or whatever, and I put them in there and I walk you through like a 4-step process to making these decisions, to how to think about how to make decisions in poker, so that when you're faced with any different type of decision, you have the right information to make it. And I think that's really, really valuable, and it's a different approach than a lot of other books have, because it's instead of just saying, hey, this is how you play 2 jacks here, this is what you should do, it's like, how do you formulate the ideas and the rationality behind making that decision? And then we go into a lot of other stuff about like how to understand variance and what types of players you should be adjusting to, and when to use like a game theory approach to poker, and when to try to exploit your opponents. And so there's a lot of different methodology in there depending on the types of players you're experiencing and playing against. And then there's practical exercises. So it's really a workbook where I challenge the reader to always take these exercises and active steps that I give them at the end of each section and chapter to implement into their own game, so that they can be like, okay, this is what I just learned and read, but how does that apply to me? And there's all these sorts of exercises you can do to make sure that you're, hey, I'm taking this, like what I told Norman about in the beginning. It's like watching and reading and learning is good, but unless you're taking action to apply that into your own game, then the content is really not going to benefit you the most. So I think that the structure is really conducive to learning, and if you're really serious about the strategy aspect, I would recommend checking that out. So I think it's good. I wrote it, so of course I think it's good. But I spent a lot of time on it, and I wouldn't put it out there if I didn't think it was worth everything you're paying for it and whatever. So Diego has a question. Oh, sorry. Let me get to Mike first. Mike was there. So would poker coaching be more beneficial to add to all the other items? Well, for sure. And I'm not trying to say, hey, you have to work with me or plug my own coaching. I do coaching, and I think it's benefited my clients immensely. But whether you work with me or any other coach, make sure they're good, make sure they have the advice that they need to give you to take your game to where you want it to be, and that you trust them. But and I told Norman this in the beginning, my philosophy is to apply the same, if you want to be serious about poker, you need to start treating poker like an athlete would a sport, right? So look at the progression of another athlete. Look at Michael Jordan had a coach. Roger Federer had 5 different tennis coaches. You look up at Roger Federer's box, the U.S. Open, or Novak Djokovic, there's 5 people sitting there. He has a trainer, a dietitian, a health coach, a mental coach. I mean, that's the #1 player in the world, or the #1 player of all time, has these resources to make them better. There's nobody in the world that's better at the activity that they do than them, and they still have people working with them to make them better. So in poker, it's so much different, the mindset about having a coach, because it's such a challenge to someone's ego that oh my gosh, you need a coach at something like this, you must suck. But if you look at the really successful people, it's the opposite. the best always have coaches because they know that they can be even better than they are, and the best are only competing with themselves. They want to be even better than they can be. So I would say it's probably getting custom training is the biggest thing you could do to improve your game because you have someone working with you directly one-on-one, and so there's no other energy that's going to be spent from any other product or service that is as intense as working with someone directly. So I think you would get the most out of that, and if you're not, then there's two reasons why you're not getting the most out of that. And one of them is you're not working hard enough with the coach or what the coach is saying, or you're not implementing what the coach learns. And the second one is that your coach isn't the right coach for you. So if you're not getting something out of coaching, again, Roger Federer had 5 tennis coaches, so he switched. But it doesn't mean that he was against the idea of coaching. It just means that he wasn't finding someone that was right for him. So if you're not finding that mix where you're like, oh my God, this was so much better to improve my situation, then something is wrong. But I would definitely recommend it. So Norman's my book on Amazon. No, it's just on my website, Torelli.com. You could find it there on the right side, and you could check it out. And yeah, if you have a question about it, let me know. I'll answer more questions at the end of this about products and services I offer if any of you are curious. So happy to help there. There's some content on the site too that explains everything about the book and what you can expect to find as well. So, Diego, are you going to write a book about poker on your stories in Macau? Yeah, I have the whole concept laid out. I've been working so much on other content for you guys and these videos and webinars and stuff like that I haven't spent as much time doing creative writing as I'd like. But I do have a book laid out about the life of a high-stakes poker player. It's based on someone I know well, like me. And so I think I'm in a cool position to write a story that not many people can have experienced firsthand. And yes, Macau is going to be the plot through which the story of high-stakes poker is told. And I think it's going to be cool if I do put it all together. And if I get it on paper how it is in my mind, I think it's going to be awesome. Whether or not that happens is, I don't know. I've never written a novel before, so we'll see. But I do have a cool idea, and I hope that at some point I get that done, and it could be as like the way I imagined it, because I think it would be great. So I'm excited for that. Thank you for asking. Yeah, it's a big goal of mine. It'd be really fun to do. No, what's up, man? So to elaborate more on my question, do you feel like technology now is a requirement to get better and be better? Yeah. So actually, I have a post. Okay, well, first of all, I have a blog. I have a video on my YouTube called "The Future of Poker," where someone asks me. It was a while ago. I think it was Will, 18-year-old kid, asked me about, the future. Is poker going to be like a solved game and we're all screwed? Like no one's ever going to make money anymore? So there's a 10-minute video where I answer all of this stuff in a video on YouTube, which is on my channel. You could type it in, "The Future of Poker." It's cool. It answers that question. I also have a blog coming out about the technology, and I elaborate on that about the recent Cladicchio match versus the humans, where there's the robot that played the humans, and what I think is going to happen in the future about technology advancing so much that it gets better than humans at poker. But to answer your question, and I think that's a really cool read, so check that out. I'll be releasing it soon. Subscribe to my blog, Torelli.com. You'll see when it comes out soon. But to answer your question more practically, like for your own personal game, but just to give you the short answer, I don't think poker will be. You don't have to worry about poker being like so solved anytime soon that you can't make money. So that's the short answer, and that's my honest opinion. I elaborate more on it in the content I just told you. But you asked me if like technology is required to be better, and I'm assuming you're talking about like statistical programs like PokerStove or Flopzilla or whatever. Or, you could name your program of choice. There's hundreds of them now. Poker Tracker. Is it required to get better? It's definitely not. It's not required to get better. There's a lot of things you can do to get better. You could read other books or take private coaching or watch videos or talk with friends. So you're going to get better doing those other things. But there's a level that you cannot quite achieve without knowing certain things that a human cannot comprehend on its own. So there's certain situations in terms of equity or calculations that you're just not going to be able to do on your own. There's certain times when even if you could do them on your own, like a computer could do them so much faster and more accurately, with so much more precision that you can get so much more feedback from using poker programs. And I know people are like apprehensive about using them, or nobody likes math and numbers and technology and stuff like that. I get it. So if I had to pick one program that you should use, it's Poker Cruncher. I have a Mac, so I use Poker Cruncher. You could also use Poker Stove for a PC, and basically just playing around with equities and hand ranges. It's super easy. It's free. I don't even Poker Cruncher might cost like $10, but it's worth 100,000 times more than you pay for it. Whatever it is, you should get that program and just mess around with it. Like next time you're in a spot where you're like, I wonder if I should call or fold here, open the program, give the guy a hand range, and see what your equity is. Like if someone tells me a hand of poker they played during the session that they need an actual hand range analysis, I'll share my screen and run you through an equity calculation I would do, just to show you guys. Like someone send me a hand, type it in the chat like really easily for me to understand, and I will show you guys the equity calculation I do and that you should be doing. I think it's really valuable, and I'll share it with you for free. All right, so you should be doing that though, and that's sort of like, I tell this a lot to my clients too. So a lot of people don't have time to play more poker, or they're like, look, I don't want to be a professional necessarily. I just want to like get the best I can given the constraints of my life situation. Like I have kids or a job or whatever. Fine, I get it. Like what's the one thing I could do to kind of like get the most value for the time I spent? And so it's based on the 80-20 principle. Like 80% of the results come from 20% of the output. So if there's an 80-20 principle in technology or hand range analysis or studying, I would say using a poker program would be very, very 80-20. It would be really valuable. You're going to get 80% of the benefit with 20% of the effort, 20% of the time. And that's where I would spend my time. Of course, you could use other programs and get ancillary results, but the vast majority of your stuff's going to come from there. So, hey, How June, see you just joined. What's up, man? Hey, everybody else still here? Diego or Mad? Thanks for sticking around, entertaining you guys. I'm happy. All right. So Emad asked a question. I play 1-2 games. Feel comfortable with it? You feel comfortable with it? All right, good. He has 10 buy-ins for the game, so I was wondering if I'm basically wrong with my bankroll to play this game. Well, also, what is your best suggestion, the best time to move up to a bigger game or take a shot in any game? Okay, so bankroll management question here from Emad. I'm glad you asked. I had a few more of those on YouTube, I think, and also on some emails that people sent to me. So I'll open it right now. So I have my people here telling me I need to check my YouTube. I got a bunch of comments, so I will check that after. Everybody on YouTube watching, hang around. Thank you. Love you guys, and I will check soon. So now I'm trying to multitask, which I'm not good at, so I'm opening this link to my YouTube. Okay, so Emad's question, if you have an option for a smaller game, I would play it. 10 buy-ins is like, it's going to basically affect the way that you're able to play in the game. So you're not going to be able to play the playing style that you would if you had like 30 or 40 buy-ins. You're not going to be able to take shots or be aggressive or make big calls or go with the read that you know that you're capable of making or whatever it is, right? You're going to be sort of limited. And so you're already going in at a disadvantage just by the bankroll limitation that you have. I remember when we played in the big game in Macau, like the biggest advantage that the recreational players had over the pros is that whenever they would lose, they would kick up the game, and so the money was insignificant for them there, even though we were playing for a ridiculous amount of money. There wasn't an amount that really had any practical value to them, so they could just double or triple the blinds or straddle or double straddle, whatever. And they basically put you so far out, they really put you outside of your comfort zone to where, eventually, if you're not ready, it could alter the way you play the game. And that's when they eventually level out the competition, because now you're so much less of a threat as a professional or as a talented player if they know you're not capable of making a certain play in a certain spot, or you're too scared to 3-bet or 4-bet pre-flop, or you're never going to go with your read because the money is so big. Now they've taken you outside your comfort zone and they've leveled the playing field. Suddenly the professional isn't necessarily a professional anymore if he doesn't have all the tools that he used to have. So it doesn't matter how big of the game you're playing is. What matters is the formula for your bankroll, and 10 buy-ins, whether it's in the biggest game in Macau or in the smallest game in the world or anywhere in between, is going to alter the way that you play the game. And so I'm concerned about you not being able to shine and to play the way that you feel like you otherwise could play if you had more money. So my suggestion in moving up would be not to, and to be more cautious. And I would like to see you have 30, 40, 50 buy-ins for that game, but that doesn't mean I'm opposed to you taking shots with a small percentage of your bankroll before you have big buy-ins. So what I mean by that is if you look at your bankroll like you would like a stock portfolio or like a financial portfolio or whatever, it's not like all your money is invested in one place. It's not like all your money is invested in low-risk options, right? Like you're not going to invest all your money in like a 0.1% return situation. You're going to have some some gold, some real estate, some startup capital, and some high-risk capital, right? So in the same way, your poker bankroll could have some of that. You could have some shot-taking bankroll within your poker bankroll. Make sure it's limited and make sure it doesn't affect the rest of your money. And most importantly, make sure it doesn't affect the way that you're playing the everyday game. And you don't want to kill off your confidence or ability to make that money back if you bust it taking shots. So that's my advice to you. And yeah, with 10 buy-ins, you just really need to spend, and you really need to get it up to 20. You just need to play a style that allows you to win with less variance. And this is something else I talk about in the book, by the way, that I just wrote. It's like the adjustments you need to be making based on the amount of variance you're incurring in the game and the types of players you're playing against. So it's like, it's easy to say in theory that you should play a certain style of poker, but everybody lives in it. So depending on how much money you have or what situation you're in or how big the shot of the game you're taking is, or the opportunity you have to make that money back elsewhere, or how much money that is in the real world, those things all affect your everyday decisions and your playing style. And so I give you a lot of practical tools in the book I talked about some of them now, but I give you a lot of exercises and practical tools to actually build that into your own game and to figure out for yourself, what's the best strategy to do. So it's beyond the scope of what I can cover here, but if you're really looking for another level, check that out. Good stuff. Yeah. Yeah, let's check that. Oh, yeah, so, sorry. Oh, yeah. So real quick, too, I was told to mention you, this guy taking care of this with me. If you want to participate in the next webinar, send an email to alectorelli@gmail.com with the subject live webinar, and send me some subjects, some questions. If I don't get to it this time, definitely send me some subject matter and some questions. And again, just send me an email, alectorelli@gmail.com. I'll type it in here with the subject live webinar, and that way I could just kind of have an idea for maybe having a specific topic for next time. So I mean, this time we're jumping all over the place. I'm happy to answer everybody's questions, but next time, hey, maybe we'll do a bankroll management webinar. Or maybe we'll do a whatever poker technology analysis range calculator webinar. Then people could join based on what their interests are, and we can try to get something that everybody's interested in. So Norman had to step away again. Where can I get your book? Here, I'm going to type in my website, alectorelli.com, and it's on the right sidebar. You can see it right there on the homepage. Also, you could click on about coaching or something at the top too. You should be able to find it. So there's that train again. Yeah, that goes every 30 minutes. So it's pretty amazing actually how loud it is. You guys could hear it here. Imagine when you're sleeping. It's so ridiculous. In my last video, I actually had to cut the recording of my hand of the day because this friggin' blowhorn thing going on. All right. So Mike Brandon sent me the hand. Yeah, Jack 10 in the small. Okay, maybe we'll do that hand at the end, the technology hand. I don't want to jump too far away from people's engagement questions, but maybe I'll do that if I have time at the end. Yeah, Norman, I don't sleep. I just listen to the train. So, all right, I'm going to go to YouTube. I know I have a bunch of questions on there. Let's see. How do I find YouTube? Here we go. So everybody on YouTube, you guys aren't in the webinar, but you're asking questions about the webinar. That's awesome. So let's see here. How do I find? Oh, now I'm listening to myself. I can't see the questions. I can't see the questions. Sorry, guys. try and answer your questions from YouTube. I have a bunch more in the email. I just figured I want to get to everybody here. Oh, here we go. No, I see it. Okay. Awesome. Wow, look at this. Everybody commented. Thank you, guys. So, all right. James Gilliam has a question. Good evening. My question is, when playing a cash game, how much time should you stage of the hand? Also, how do you remain calm and focused at the table? Looking at your videos, I noticed you never get rattled. Thank you. Well, yeah, it's easier during the videos. It's always easier to observe someone else's play than to play the hands yourself. But hopefully you were talking about some of the Poker Night in America sessions, and thank you for that. So how much time should you allow yourself to make a decision? I don't think that me giving you like 22 seconds, is not really that practical, and there's not really a right answer to something like that. What's much more important is what you're doing during the time that you're thinking. I remember I had a period in my early on in my career where I was just think about. I would think during the hand, and then sometimes I would not really have a clear formulaic way of making decisions, and so I would be thinking about something, and then I just ultimately wouldn't know necessarily what to do, and that was struggling. So I would make decisions. Sometimes I would take a long time. Sometimes I wouldn't take a lot of time, but it didn't really matter because what I was thinking about was much more important than how long I was actually taking. So I think that what you should be thinking about is, if you have the best hand here and what's the best way to play the hand. And just be asking yourself these internal questions and having this internal dialogue to be like, what is the best thing I could do to win the most money possible? What's the best way to play this hand? What am I trying to accomplish? What do I think my opponent has? What does he put me on? And just asking yourself a few of these questions to get you to an answer of what's the best way to play the hand and why. So however long that takes you will shorten with practice. And sometimes, maybe you've seen some of the videos I put out, sometimes I make decisions super quickly because you just have you have a lot of experience making decisions that eventually it just happens for you. Other times, sometimes I sit there for 2 minutes because I'm in a spot that's a little more convoluted. So it's not really about the time you take, it's about what you're thinking during the time. So how do you remain calm and focused on the table? Good question. That's something that I worked on a lot, and I think that there's so many things that go into it that take people away from being calm and collected. So the big things that I notice are people playing outside their means. They don't have enough money for the game, that they're so emotionally involved in the size of the game that they're playing that every decision is really important. The money means a lot to them, and it's hard for them to play their best poker. Another thing is people just don't have a lot of discipline or emotional control, and so when they lose, they get really rattled and they get off their game completely. And I think a lot of that has to do with your mental strength and mental stamina, and that's something that you got to work on. You got to work on your. Most people, when they work on poker, we talked about this earlier. If you had a circle and you divided that circle between where you spend your time in poker, I would say most people spend all their time playing poker, and then the few people that spend their time doing things other than playing, good for you guys for watching a webinar trying to improve at poker. That's awesome. This is the types of things you should be doing to improve aside from playing poker. But if you look at the way, if you want to break that circle down even further or break a slice of that pie down, and you look at how am I improving my poker game, and this is also not even your guys' fault. It's also a function of the type of content that's being released by the so-called experts in the game. Most of it is strategy-based. So most of the people don't ever work on this part of their game, and so it goes neglected for so long, and it's not a part of their personality or their poker game that they work on, and so it's not something that I was naturally born like a Buddhist monk, Zen, sitting there at the poker table, indifferent to winning and losing hundreds of thousands of dollars. Nobody's born like that. Let me tell you, it's not just something that that you're you have. It's just something that you have to just spend a lot of time working on. And so the challenge would be to first acknowledge that this is a big part of the game that you want to improve on, and go to bat at spending time working on you being a better poker player instead of you being better at playing poker. And that's what my course, 4-Step Poker, is all about. That's why I have 2 completely different types of content. The first is a book where it's all strategy-based. 4-Step Poker is the course, my video course, which you could also find on my site, has nothing to do with strategy. It's all about being better at being a poker player. And, you know, bankroll management and tilt control and mindset and focus and concentration, all those things help you be the best poker player you can be. And without that, you're not ever going to, you know, it's as important as the strategy. If you don't have the access to play your best game, it doesn't matter how good you are if you're not capable of playing it or you're not capable of putting it into action. And it's really the mark of talent when you see someone that plays well when they've just lost a hand, or they play well when they're losing, or they play well in a situation that otherwise would be difficult to do. Because anyone can play well when they're winning, anyone can play well when they're running well, or when things are going their way, or their life is great and everything is going perfect and they're outside of poker, away from the table. It's easy to play well in optimal circumstances, right? Like that's just easy. Life is like that too. It's easy things to go right when everything falls in line for you and business is good and whatever, right? It's easy to be happy. The challenge in your life and in your poker game is how to thrive when things aren't going well. And so that's really the mark of a good player, and it's really the difference between the amateur and a professional. And that's really what, you know, where a lot of people's time should be spent. So I feel like it's like the biggest, you know, the most neglected part of people's poker game. I feel like it's the thing that people ask me about the most. It's one of the things that I feel like my clients come to me asking about the most often, or if not, they come to me wanting to talk about hands of poker, and then we end up talking about these sorts of things that make them better at playing their hands of poker. Because I think most people acknowledge, you know, when they're on their A game, they play really, really well. And the key is getting on your A game often. And so it's something you need to work on. Like you need to start figuring out what things bother you at the table. Why do these things bother you? How are you going to be, you know, what practical things are you going to be doing to focus at the table? Like maybe even setting yourself little exercises like, okay, before each hand I'm going to do this, or during each hand I'm going to do that, or I'm not going to be checking my phone, or, you know, it's a discipline, an exercise in discipline. So most likely, if it's not frustrating and boring and painful, then you're not doing it right. Because that's what discipline is. It sucks. It's not fun not eating cheesecake to eat healthy, to lose weight. I mean, that's discipline. It sucks. So work on it, you know. That's what it is. All right. End of rant. Cool. Good question. All right. More questions from YouTube. Do you have any questions in the comment? I'm going back and forth here. Diego's laughing. Thank you, Diego. So, hey, Alec. This question's from JB on YouTube. So, hey, Alec, when playing in a casino, do you set winning money goals or session times? How do you decide when it's time to go or just to leave when you're tired? Thank you, Jeff. Good question. So, what's up, Jay? I think we talked a little bit on YouTube as well, so thanks for all your comments recently. All right. So, do I set winning money goals or session times? My answer is no, I don't. And I don't want to say that this is the right thing to do. I want to say that it's a little bit what I talked about with James's last question, is that the key to being successful is, and Dana Grande says this too, like the biggest key to being successful is self-awareness and knowing what, hey, what's up, Noah's taking notes, you're a legend. So I see him with the pen there, that's awesome. So the key to being successful is knowing yourself, and I came to my answer. What's much more important is how I came to my answer rather than what my answer is. So I'm going to tell you my answer is no, but I would say you're making a catastrophic mistake if you just take Alec Torelli's answer and apply it to your own game, because I am not you, right? So how I came to my answer is through introspection, and I figured out that if I go to the poker table and I feel like I have to be somewhere else or have something else to do, or that the rest of my foreseeable future until I fall asleep has some other element to it other than what I'm doing right now, which is playing poker, then I don't play well. If I have to be somewhere, I know I have to quit, or I get a phone call, or like I have to go, or something happens, it's really hard for me to be in the game. And I think that most people play this way. because let's face it, like if you have to be somewhere in 2 hours and you're stuck and you know you have to leave, like there's all these other things that are distracting you from playing your best poker that it's hard to be at your best, right? Like it's naturally hard to do because there's a conflict of energy and interest here. So if I know that like, even if I know that I'm like likely going to quit in 8 hours because 8 hours is when I get tired, or 8 hours is when I want to go to sleep because tomorrow I want to get up and go to the gym at 8 a.m. or like whatever it is, I don't like set a certain time because that just makes me feel like a sense of urgency as I approach that time limit. So if the time limit is here, I have no urgency here, but the closer I get to that time limit, the more sense of urgency I feel, which causes me to play worse. So I will acknowledge that, hey, there's something I want to do tomorrow at 8 a.m., or I don't want to risk playing too long to mess up my sleep schedule because the incremental hourly rate I'm going to gain isn't worth my lifestyle, so I will quit the game consciously, but I don't go into the game knowing that. And that's because for me, that screws with my ability to play my absolute best and have my undivided attention and focus be on winning money and just making in-game tactical decisions. And anything that takes me away from that is sucking my energy and giving it to other people. So I don't subject myself. There's enough struggles you have at the poker table. I'm never going to subject myself to something that's there. On the same logic, if I set a winning money goal, that's also a conflict of interest. I play poker now more than ever because I love to play, not because I have to play. And so if I go to the poker table, I'm like, okay, I'm going to quit if I win $10,000. If I'm winning $9,400, I'm like, shit, I almost don't want to win the next hand because then I have to quit the game. I just got here. I've only been here an hour, and now I have to quit. And like I just dedicated my whole day to playing poker, and now I like subconsciously, even though it's like it sounds counterintuitive on the surface, subconsciously you almost don't want to win because then you have to quit. And nobody wants to like quit when they just got there or if they're not ready to quit. So why would I put myself in a spot where there's something other than myself in the moment determining what's the best thing for me to do? Because only I can determine that, and the more self-aware I am and the better I become at this ability, the better I am going to be to calibrate whether or not I should be staying in the game. To take a trivial example, let's say you're like, okay, my session goal is 10 grand. You're up 10,000. And like you're feeling great. You're on fire. You're like, I'm in the zone. I'm playing my best possible. I'm like, I could play for another 6 hours. And then the hugest fish in the world sits down, and he's going to lose 100 grand in this session. And then you're like, well, I hit my 10K goal. I'm going to quit because I wrote it down on a piece of paper right here. See, it's rule number 7 for John Smith's rules. Like, you'd be a moron to quit, right? So I don't believe insofar that I'm going to break my own rules, if there's an extraneous circumstance, I'm not going to make a rule that is a blanket statement to apply to myself. I just don't believe it's the most effective way of determining what I should and shouldn't be doing in the moment. You know, I'm a big kid, and I can make those decisions in real time. And that's something you always have to be aware of. So how do I decide when it's time to go? There's a lot of exercises that I have for this that I do personally that I've sort of calibrated over the years. One of them I'll give you is, let me see. One of them I'll give you is if you feel like you can no longer be aware of every minute detail that's happening in the game, then it's time to go. And so what I mean by that is if you are ever like making a pre-flop decision, because generally when people's play deteriorates, it happens pre-flop. If you're ever making a decision at the game and you're not thinking about all the reasons why you're making it, and you're not taking into account all the variables that are at play and everything that just happened in the past, then you've lost your focus in the game. And so when you become aware that you've lost your focus, then it's time to quit. Because when you're aware that you've lost your focus, you're already playing your B game. So the awareness happens generally after the damage is done. Most people are aware that they're tilted way beyond the time they started playing worse than their best poker. And most people, by the time they realize that, and by the time they quit after they realize that, hours have gone by and they've lost either expectation or actual money. So the key is just figuring out when is, constantly be checking in with yourself every hour. and ask, am I at my best? Did I miss something? Am I slipping? Am I tired? Am I frustrated? Do I not want to be here? And sometimes something as trivial as asking yourself if you still want to be at the table, or you're just playing because you're stuck and you don't want to quit or admit defeat, is enough to sort of get in touch with what you're trying to do. And I think that's big. So I think poker's hard enough if you're not playing your A game, and if you're ever slightly below that point, then it's time to go. So it's a good question, too. These are a lot of things that people struggle with. This is why I built 4-Step Poker, like the course, because I just don't feel like there's much content out there about things that are geared towards being a better poker player. So we've talked for a long time. I've talked for a long time. You guys have listened. Thank you. And we haven't talked that much about being better at playing poker. Being better at playing poker is my answer to Noah's question, like, hey, do this hand range analysis thing, where everyone's like, oh my God, shoot me with a gun. That's really boring. That's like being better at playing poker. And while that's super important and people should work on that, and a lot of people end up wanting more advice and help on how to be better at being a better poker player, which is a lot of things we talked about. That's why I built the course 4-Step. It just goes over all these things that people just you can't find this sort of types of content because it's just not made. Like generally, the focus is always on strategy, and I think that's sad because strategy is only half the battle. So I mean, so many people. I had a client earlier that is just has everything set up to win, but just bleeds off a ton of money when they're losing, and that offsets all the hard work and discipline and superior play and timed aggression and good reads that they had, because the time that they lose 3x the time that they won, and they lose that money in like a 2-hour span at 4 in the morning when they're tilted and tired and stuck, and it's like these habits that they have as poker players inhibit them from being otherwise successful. And if you look at the difference between pros and amateurs, it's just the pros make less mistakes. They just do that less. They're just more consistent. So it's huge stuff. And I'm glad you guys asked some questions about this. I think it's important. So go back. Anybody here in the webinar? Questions? Open it up to you guys first. You guys are here. You guys deserve face time. Nope. All right. Cool. So more questions on YouTube. More questions on YouTube. Oh, man. Let's see. I have a lot of questions. I'm trying to pick which ones to answer on. Thank you guys so much for asking all these questions. While I'm looking, I want to say what's up to everybody that found me through Tiltbook. I'm enjoying that site as well, and thank you guys. Thanks for your support over there on Tiltbook. That's cool. So just saying what's up. Shout out to you guys, too. So Pamela has a question about satellite tournaments. Pamela, I just made a video called The Secret to Satellite Poker. Check it out. It's on my YouTube. If you're watching, there's a whole video on satellite poker tournaments. She's going to the World Series of Poker next month. Made a video on it, just for you. Not just for you, but someone else that asked the same question. But it could just be for you, too. All right. Let's see. More questions. Mario. Hey, Alec. Do you have any suggestions for remaining dominant as a tournament progresses towards the bubble? All right, good question. So this will be a better poker player question. This will be a strategy question. We'll do that. Switch back and forth. So, do you have any questions for remaining dominant as a tournament progresses towards a bubble? I've been grinding tournaments lately, and I found myself running well earlier and towards the middle stages of the game, but I tend to fall off closer towards the bubble and losing big pots. I've cashed a few times, but most of the time I end up being on or near the bubble. How do I assure more cashes? Okay, so another broad question, which I'm going to try and give you an answer that you can actually apply to your game. If I had, let me just tell you, if I had an answer to your question that was an absolute truth, I either couldn't tell you because it was so valuable. Let's face it, if I had the answer that, assured that you would cash more times by telling you one thing, I would do it every single time, right? I mean, you'd be like finding the fountain of youth, right? So or it would, or it would also be bad because everybody would be doing the same thing, right? So the answer to any question is you can't really have, in a game of incomplete information like poker, you can't have an absolute answer to anything. And that's sort of important to keep in mind when you're analyzing your game or other players or situations. There is no absolute truth. That's why questions like my man before, Jeff, JB, Jeff, like, at what point should I quit? Like, it's not like I can't just give you an answer. I have to give you tools to make decisions, okay? Another person on here asked about how to find a good coach. A coach should not give you answers. They should empower you to make your own decisions better, okay? That's the answer to how you have a good coach, and that's how you improve at poker, right? So that's what I'm going to do here with my man Mario. That's what I try to do in all my videos and all my content. But anyway, that's just important to keep in mind through your own journey through poker. So he's grinding tournaments, and he struggles towards the bubble. And maybe it's just variance. Like, it could just be that you ran well in the beginning, and towards the bubble you get like card dip, right? But me telling you that it's variance doesn't really help you that much. But I just want you to acknowledge that that's a possibility, especially with tournament poker. But I want to give you some strategy about tournaments and a way to view them that is different from what you might be doing now, okay? Tournament poker, especially, is much less about the cards you have, and it's much more about the situation that you're in. Because there lies the truth in tournaments that a chip gained is not as beneficial as a chip lost, simply because if you accumulate all the chips in the tournament, right? Let's say there's 1 million chips in play. If you accumulate all 1 million chips, you don't get $1 million in cash. You get 18% of that, or whatever the first place prize money is, right? So one chip is not $1. So gaining a chip doesn't help you as much as losing a chip hurts you. Okay? Don't forget that. So this should adjust how you're actually playing the tournament. So when you are short stack, I know you asked me about being the big stack, but it doesn't really matter because you're not always the big stack. When you're the short stack, your chips are really valuable because your seat intrinsically is worth something. And doubling your chip stack doesn't double the value of your seat. So if your seat is worth X, if you double up, your seat is not worth 2X, it's worth 1.4X or something like that, depending on a lot of other factors, how many people are left and payouts and blah, all these other things. But it's never worth 2X. So you should be playing tighter to get into the money because your chips that you're risking are more, you're risking more by risking chips than you are gaining when you win chips, right? So I didn't explain it the best way, but we talked about it earlier. You're not getting 1-to-1 on your return, so you have to be more cautious. When you're the big stack, it's like the opposite for two reasons. One is that additional chips don't help you that much, so being really conservative with excess chips doesn't gain you money, right? So if you have 10 big blinds, your stack is worth X. If you have 20 big blinds, it's worth 1.5X. 30 big blinds, it's worth 2X. But if you have 100 big blinds, it's worth like 4X. So your stack doesn't increase, the value of your stack doesn't increase proportionally with your chips. So when you have excess amount of chips, the excess isn't worth that much. So losing them doesn't decrease your overall chip stack value by a lot. So if you have 100 big blinds and you go down to 80, your seat is worth pretty close to the same, which means you should be super aggressive from a theoretical standpoint. The second reason you should be super aggressive is because everybody else has to adhere to the fact that if they double their stack, it's not as valuable to them as it is detrimental if they lose their stack. So what does that mean? They have to be tighter with 10 or 20 or 30 big blinds because their chips are really valuable. So it gives more credence to you being aggressive, more credence to them being passive, and that's why I said to you that your cards are less important than the situation that you find yourself in. Now, my theory is under the assumption that other people know what the theory is. Now, if you're playing in a $40 tournament, like, people might not be cognizant or care of the fact that they're on the bubble. If you're playing in the World Series event that someone else just wrote to me about that they're playing, Pamela, she's playing a World Series event, people are going to be super cognizant of the fact that they're on the bubble because nobody wants to bubble the World Series of Poker event because it's just people perceive that as more valuable. It has more intrinsic value with the money, more perceptual value because of the prestige, and people flew all the way out to Vegas to play. Nobody wants to bubble, right? So you could take advantage of that dramatically when you're on the bubble or when you're in the money, because people want to move up in pay jumps. They want to get to the final table. They want to get top 5 or whatever it is, right? So what do I mean by that? Like, what's a practical situation? Well, a practical situation is like if someone opens with 30 big blinds and you have 100 big blinds, it would be a good spot to 3-bet them because they're pretty much put in a spot where they have to go all in or fold. They can't really call you out of position with such a short stack with 26 big blinds or something, 24 big blinds. And they open to 2 big blinds, you 3-bet them to 5, and now they're in a spot where they have to risk all 26 big blinds, and it's not profitable for them to do, because if they double up those big blinds, it doesn't help them. If they lose, it kills them, especially when they're on the bubble. So it's a really important time to be aggressive, and you should be using your big stack even more than you were when you were a medium-sized stack or at any other stage of the tournament. So I hope that helps. I hope that's some practical advice as well as some theoretical advice for how you should adjust the amount of money you're risking and the style of play you have based on the situation you're in. So that's like a lot of tournament theory right there. Yeah, that's good stuff. More of that in the book too. But I might do a book one day on just tournament poker strategy because so many people ask me about that. Maybe I'll do that as my next book. I don't know. Do a good book on that. I think that's so much different than cash games. There's so much different stuff going on there. So anyway, I'll take a few more questions here. I've been here a long time. See you, Mike. Bye, everybody. 2 people are leaving. So I'm going to wrap up in a sec, probably. I'll take a few more questions. If anybody in the webinar has a question, how John went away with the video. He's scared. Let me know. I'll answer them here. So before I go, well, I'll answer a few more questions. Hang on. Thank you, David. Says, good analogy. What sports teams do you follow? It doesn't really matter what sports teams you follow to kind of like help with the analogy, but I would say I follow tennis mostly because I think tennis is a great sport to follow if you watch poker because it's really individual. And there's a lot of the same mental elements to tennis that there are to poker. And if you watch matches, you'll see that a lot of times people, it isn't about how good they are at tennis, it's about how good they are at their ability to play their best tennis. And you should watch some of the matches. You'll see people crumble, even though they have talent. Talent doesn't matter that much. A lot of people have talent. It's who uses the talent that wins. All right. So, more questions. What's the best way to submit a hand? I'm sure I get a lot of this. I get a lot of hands submitted to me like through social media and stuff. I really appreciate it, everybody. I'm glad you guys are like willing to share your hands with me and want them included for the show. But definitely send them through my blog, alectorelli.com, because I can't, like, when I go to do these videos, I go to my email and I just select some of the hands. So if they're all like on my social media and YouTube and like under a comment under the 36th video I did, it's like I'm not going to be able to find your hand and do it for my show. It's not like I like just have it in my memory of everybody's hand. So definitely send it to me on my blog, and it's the best way to submit it. I have them all in one place, and I could select the best ones from there. So, all right, that's definitely a big one. So Rahul Matlani, what's up, man? Has a question. How do you deal with being card dead during cash games? Patience. Like I just talked a lot about situations, and sometimes your cards aren't that important where you could find situations to help you win money where like that pre-flop someone is really weak, and you can take advantage of that by re-raising with a marginal hand. If you're relying too much on your cards to win, then you're taking the skill out of the game. So anybody could be dealt, great hands. Anybody could win with great hands. And I think this was a question that Mike had earlier. One of the first questions I answered, or Norman that had earlier, was like, I just play my hands, and what do I do when I have, wait till I have good hands and I'm good at playing those good hands, what do I do? It's like, if you're only relying on your cards to win, then you're basically trading money with everybody else, because everybody wins the same amount with aces. Not everybody, but everybody wins when they have aces. The difference is, how do you do when you don't have aces, and when you have all those in-between hands, or how do you make opportunities for yourself? So you should be experimenting more and doing that. And if you find that you're not making opportunities for yourself in poker, then you're not looking hard enough, you're not being aggressive enough, and you're not working hard enough on your game away from poker to find those opportunities. You're not being observant enough at the table. One of those things. And the second thing is patience. Like, a lot of the game is just patience. To play excellent poker, you got to fold a lot. People accuse a lot of people being nitty that are really good, but playing 9-handed live poker, you're only supposed to play 1 out of 9 hands. I mean, that's by definition being nitty. And then if you have a bad seat because the guy to your left is aggressive, or you're the short stack in a tournament, or you're card dead, then maybe you play 1 out of every 15 hands. And maybe you raise pre-flop and everybody folds. So maybe you see the flop 1 out of every 30 hands. That's nitty by definition. People are like, oh, you're a nit. Poker is a nitty game, right? There's 9 people. So you don't really have much choice from a theoretical standpoint. So you've got to have a little bit of patience, and especially in live poker. You play 30 hands an hour. It's easy to go an hour or 2 without playing really game, because that's just variance. So harder game. He also asked how many buy-ins would you be done during a cash game? What's a stop loss? That should be a function of your personal opinion, when you stop playing your best. So when is it that you actually stop playing your best poker? And that's when you should stop playing. Or you should stop playing before you get to that point. You have to cross the line to know where it is, which is fine, but you stop playing before that. And that's a personal decision. So you have to be in touch with, looking for, we talked about this earlier, looking for those signals for when your play starts to deteriorate, and then stop playing before that happens. My personal comfort level is just so irrelevant, because it doesn't help you at all. So it would change by the day. Some days I could lose, not be frustrated. Some days I get frustrated if I lose 2 buy-ins because I'm not, in the mood to lose, and then whatever, quit, whatever it is. There's no ego in quitting. You don't have to be. It's not a defeat if you quit. It's a sign of maturity. People think that oh, you quit, you gave up, or you're not good. Yeah, that's true in a tournament, or that's true in a 5-set tennis match, or that's true in a triathlon. Obviously, you can't give up. But in poker, it's the opposite. You need to listen to yourself, not force yourself. If you're not doing that, then your ego's getting in the way of you making decisions, and you're costing yourself money. The only person suffering is you. Just you. Yeah, that's true. That's true. All right. So I think I'm almost out of time. I answered one more question in the chat here. I just saw 2 people join. What's up, Brian Damiano? I guess. So, if you guys, Brian, especially if you have a question, let me know. I'll answer it here. I'm going to answer Hal's question here in the chat. How do you deal with players that are loose, aggressive, and deep stack, and good at playing back against weak opponents? Hal, I would love to answer this, but I did. I went on a huge tirade about this earlier with someone. So rewatch part of the video. Yeah, Brian, mute your mic. Actually, Brian, your mic is on. Do you have a question? Because I think it's getting heard in the background. If not, then maybe just a question here in the chat. How do you deal with players that are loose, aggressive, and back? All right, I'm muting you. All right, muted Brian. I love you, but I had to mute you because I could hear you. So there you go. Diego's laughing. All right, my man. All right, so if you have questions for me for the next webinar, you guys want a specific subject, send me an email to alectorelli@gmail.com. I'll type it in here with the subject live webinar, and don't do it all in kind of stuff, obviously. So yeah, do the subject live webinar and just tell me like, hey, I'd like to answer this question, or I'd like this subject, and maybe we could schedule these where we have a specific subject going on, and there's a theme for it or something like that. It's my first one, so thanks for bearing with me with some technical difficulties, but maybe I'll do more thematic ones in the future. To stay tuned, definitely check out, I'm sure you guys have been over my blog, alectorelli.com, and just subscribe there so I can send you guys an email, get on my email list when I have another one of these come out or something that is valuable to you. I'll throw you guys an email quickly as well. And yeah, you guys can watch this on YouTube anytime. It'll be on my channel. I'd appreciate it if you shared it with anyone that you thought would be like, hey, that would be cool. Would benefit from that or something like that. That would be awesome. Point them my way. That would be sweet stuff. So, any more questions here? Last minute, I will answer. Otherwise, I think I'm done. Am I done? Done? Yeah. I think I got to a lot of your guys' stuff. Sorry I didn't get to everything. There's like a ton of questions, but I try to do my best. I know I talk a lot, so I'd rather give like a real in-depth answer than just say like, oh, yes, or oh, no, yes, no. Anyway, I'll probably do more of these. I do a lot of stuff where I engage with you guys, so we'll try to find time to do some of stuff like this in the future as well. I gotta have you guys figure out a way to get people to talk more on the webinar, because my voice hurts when I talk this much. So you guys need to hold your weight here and chime in, Mr. People watching. All right, so how do you motivate? I'll answer a few more questions. All right, how do you motivate yourself every day in and out of the poker world? Well, that's a good question. So it's funny, I actually, step one of 4-step poker is about this very subject, because I think that my video course, I think that it's really important to connect what you're doing, and for me it's my, my passion, my job, my livelihood, whatever, to something that's bigger than just, making money, or you just sort of feel like a hamster spinning on a wheel, because at some point, adding more to your current situation, like it doesn't, there has to be something deeper that you're doing what you're doing for to keep you motivated. Otherwise, you're going to be burnt out and you're not going to care anymore after a while. So I'm always revising my life goals away from poker, and I'm always trying to do bigger and different and more challenging things to keep me stimulated. So I find that, this, for example, like I've really spent a lot of time with the community lately and building a personal brand, and this has been fun. I've been doing a lot of coaching. I've been building products. I've been finding ways to be stimulated through poker that, number one, help me improve as a player first and foremost, because I love to be competitive. I really try to compete with the best and be amongst the best, and that's really something that I love to do. But at the same time, I acknowledge that I need fuel and I need energy to do that, and especially it's easy to become stagnant when easy to become comfortable at a certain point, and so to really push yourself to keep improving, I have to find ways to keep the game stimulating. And so this has been an extreme example of something I did that's completely different, that kept me challenged to be always on my heels, answering questions and coaching and building content and forcing myself to build a blueprint for my thoughts and how I approach the game and simplify it down so that anyone could understand it and put it into a book and writing is a totally different challenge than me just making the decision at the table. I play poker for a long time, and so me getting good at doing it at the table is something that I've gotten good at doing, and it's like I didn't have to explain that to anyone or write it out to anyone or engage with anyone else to do that. And then building content was a totally different challenge for me. So I brought on this new complete energy that was in the world of poker that allowed me to be stimulated in a different way. It made me a lot better as a player because it made me more accountable for my actions. It made me more aware of why I do the things I do, or what things I think about, or what things actually work, or where I should spend my time studying. All these different things that I'm advising people and helping people doing, I learn through them and their questions and their struggles and their problems and their feedback and all these different things has made me better and it made me improve. So the key is, I gave you my personal example, but the key is keeping it new and exciting. Because when learning stops, boredom happens. And when you get bored, you stop improving, and then you become stagnant, and then you start to suck. Okay? So that's not good. So I had to find ways. I happen to love doing what I do. I'm sitting here talking to myself on screen and to the few brave people that are talking back to me and answering questions because I love doing this stuff. You know, I get energy out of this, and it helps me take it to my poker game. So find what gives you energy and work towards that. And when it stops giving you energy, you don't stop doing what you're doing. You find something new that gives you more energy. And so, I mean, I've had a 12-year career in poker, and so it's obvious that it's not going to be the same thing that inspired me when I was 16. Dude, I was inspired watching like a poker event on TV. Now I couldn't be bothered to do that. It would be like a chore for me to like sit there and watch like poker. You know, like it's changed where I get energy and what takes away my energy. That's not really important. What's important is just being aware of that in yourself and how you're evolving and what you need in the moment to give yourself that energy you need to be inspired. So I think that's really, really important. And again, I put it as like step one, lesson one, 4-step poker, because without that energy source, you're screwed. Like you have a finite amount you can go until either that energy source changes or it burns out, and then where are you? You're just stuck. You plateau, or you just growth stops. And so constantly revising your goals and things that motivate you are important. So do that, you'll be good. It's a good note to end on. I've been here for 2 hours. I would stay here longer, but I'm just tired of talking. My voice. This is good stuff. I really enjoyed it. Thank you to everyone that participated. Thank you to everyone at Tiltbook that joined. Appreciate you guys, loving fans on YouTube. Thanks for leaving comments and making this possible. So you guys are awesome. I will have more of these in the future. Subscribe to my blog, alectorelli.com, or send me an email, alectorelli@gmail.com, and with the subject live webinar, and I'll consider your guys' feedback for what's up, what I could do in the future and thematic stuff. If the guys in here, if anyone can give me like feedback really quick on what you think I could do better, or some thoughts too, that would be cool as well in chat. So, yeah. Otherwise, I don't know. What do I do? Do I hang up? I feel like I'm sad. I have to leave. It's like getting up from the poker table. It's easy to know when to quit, but then it's like you have to go. All right, guys. Take it easy. Love y'all. See you next webinar. Peace.